Welcome to Sacerdotus Hangouts, the broadcast that answers doubts about God, the Catholic Church, science, philosophy, and other worldly topics figured out.
Hello, welcome to Sacerdotus Hangouts. Now, here I am trying to do another open mic for atheists as I tried last week. And again, no atheist showed up. Yet, when I post something on a community or on Twitter or Facebook, I get all these different accounts messaging me, writing all kinds of profanities and all kinds of ridiculous things. But yet, when I invite them, challenge them to come join me live on an open mic session, they don't show up. It's really mind-boggling, and I don't know what other word to use to describe it than cowardice. I mean, are you only confident behind a thread or a tweet? Is that the only way you could defend or explain your reasons that you do not believe in God or that you believe there is no God? I mean, really doesn't make any sense at all. But anyhow, hopefully somebody will show up and get the discussion going and whatnot. And in the meantime, I just want to go back to some things from my Atheism is Stupid post, which hopefully will inspire any listeners out there, any atheist listeners out there to join in the discussion, whether in the sending me the questions and the Q&As feature here on Google Hangouts. Hopefully I'm able to see it, because sometimes this technology doesn't work with me sometimes. Last time I tried this open mic, I tried to show different images on the screen, and for some reason they did not show up. So it was a bit awkward reading from certain comments made by atheists, which I was responding to, but my hope was that people would actually see what I'm reading and responding to, but it did not show up, unfortunately. But anyhow, with the Atheism Stupid series, the first post, and again, let me make this clear for the 100th time. I'm not calling atheists stupid with this series. The post is entitled Atheism is Stupid, meaning the ideology, the concept is stupid, not the people. Even though some of the people may do stupid things, but that's between them and their societies, their families, and ultimately God, who is the judge. I'm not the judge, because of course I do, of course, stupid things myself. We all do. But the intention of the post was to critique atheism and the principles of it, the concepts, the arguments that espouses it. And the first thing that I mentioned in the post was about free thought. And I spoke about, or wrote rather, that atheists like to call themselves free thinkers. And they walk about with this air of confidence, like if nobody else thinks, that only they think. And one person that comes to mind is the so-called friendly atheist, um, who goes on YouTube making these different videos. And in one of the videos that he published, he says, you tell me God bless you, and I tell you I'll think for you. And he says it with such smugness and arrogance, as if he's the only one that thinks. And unfortunately, I had talked to this guy on Twitter and tried to get a discussion going, but he doesn't seem willing to have a discussion or debate with someone who will counter his ideas for obvious reasons, because some atheists, not all, love to be heard and they don't want to listen. So they want you to hear them, they want you to listen to them, to their arguments, to their ideas, but they do not want to hear yours. And if you try to present your ideas or arguments, they quickly shoot them down as heartless or stupid or ignorant or from the Bronze Age or whatnot. And it's just a ridiculous tactic, really. And it's really a turnoff because if that's all an atheist has to offer, then what's the point? I mean, how can you be a free thinker? You shut yourself to other ideas. You shut yourself off to other ideas. So anyhow, this guy, the funny atheist, says, "I'll think for you." When if you look at his videos and his blog posts, he doesn't really think things through. There are many flaws in a lot of the things that he says on YouTube and on his blog. And I even did a series on Sacerdotus Hangouts, refuting certain questions or ideas, or I forgot the name of the video. I think it was 15 things or 20 things or 19 things not to tell an atheist. And I went through each of his points and refuted them and showed how this guy really does not think about what he's saying or about to say. All he does, like every other typical atheist or new atheist today, is repeat the same old rhetoric from the 17th century, from the so-called enlightened white guys from Europe who one day decided that they are the ones that they freely think and are rational, and that they found the holy grail of intelligence, intelligentsia, whatnot, and it's completely hogwash, complete nonsense. And especially when you look at the arguments. And if you ever read Thomas Paine's Age of Reason, and if you know theology, if you know history, if you know philosophy, if you know just those three areas, and if you read Age of Reason, you will start laughing to yourself. You will say, this guy is an idiot. Where did he come about with these ideas, with these comparisons, with these arguments? Because obviously, you study history, theology, and philosophy, you have a strong grasp, granted that you paid attention. You will have a strong grasp of what your field of study is. And you will see the different fallacies that Thomas Paine makes in his work. And of course, Thomas Paine, he only went up to the sixth grade. He only had a sixth grade level education. And his life was mostly, he was a tailor. He made clothes. And Paine, since he was not well educated, he learned his information from the coffee shop. So back in the time, they had coffee shops, just like today we have Starbucks and all these different places where people sit down and have conversations. So Thomas Paine was one of these guys who would just go to these coffee shops and sit down and talk with the other guys and enjoy a cup of joe. And while they're discussing and talking about the news of the day, they will get into discussions and arguments regarding religion and science and philosophy and whatnot. So Thomas Paine would sit around with these guys, with these intelligent guys, with these educated guys, and he will pick up from this discussion knowledge. And that's where he came about with his Age of Reason. He came about with all of this information that he got from just sitting around chilling at the coffee shop with his fellow Americans, Europeans, even though he was not American himself, he was British. But with his fellow white man, let me put it that way, he would sit down and absorb all of these different arguments. Which, of course, when you look at it, it's just nonsense. It was not a big deal. And again, if you're educated in history, theology, and philosophy, and if you lived back then, and we're in one of these coffee shops, you will easily laugh at these guys and say, "No, you guys are wrong. You guys are making all kinds of arguments, appealing to ignorance, and you have no clue what you're talking about. Christianity did not come from this. The Virgin Mary did not come from a Greek goddess." And all these different claims that were going around at the time, attacking Romanism or Catholicism. Because remember, at the time, the Reformation was still fresh. People still hated the Catholic Church, and because they saw the church as this oppressive force. So this idea of free thinking and the friendly atheist and whatnot, or whatever he wants to call himself, claiming that he's freely a thinker, intelligent, and that somehow he has theists by the you know what, and he could shut them down. It's just completely hogwash. And to date, I have not found I have not found an atheist who presents himself truly as a free thinker or herself. And what I mean by that is that almost every atheist that I encounter, especially the online ones, the real ones in real life are much different, especially the ones in universities that I have encountered. My own friends, because I too was an atheist, and I'm still friends with them, of course. They present atheism much differently, more academically, more. It's completely different from what you see online and on different blogs around the internet. It's completely different. I actually get some original arguments, some arguments that are a bit convincing, a bit strong, but still fallacious because of that element of appealing to ignorance. But in regards to the people online, those that claim to be atheists, they basically recycle the same argument. And it's almost, and I hate to knock on them, but the Watchtower people, the Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm sure you have encountered them. They come knocking at your door. And on Saturday or on a nice, beautiful day, they come and they hound you down your home trying to sell you these little magazines, these little booklets. Or they catch you on the street and try to have a conversation with you. And these people, when they go through their training in the Kingdom Hall, they literally practice how to engage people. That's how they work. So these people are instructed how to talk to people, how to preach to them, how to answer their questions. And they learn how to detect different responses. Like if the person gets annoyed, slams the door on them, curses them out. They are trained on how to deal with these types of scenarios. So when they come to your door, they stop in the street. It's all scripted. They learn this. They are, I hate to use the word, but they are brainwashed to respond to you in certain ways. And if you are astute, if you know, if you could see the pattern that they're using, the script, so to speak, you could stump them easily because you know where the conversation is going. You could find how they're going to come at you. And based on what you reply to them, what are they going to reply to you? And if you're really keen to their way of communicating with you, you will notice this pattern. It's repetitive. And they do this with everyone. And they actually take notes. They actually write down, okay, this person in this house did this and that. This person in this apartment did this and that. This person I met on whatever street, whatever avenue, did this and did that, said this, said that. And they report that back to the elder in the Kingdom Hall, where more training goes on. Well, the atheists online, especially online, those that are online, they tend to do something similar. They repeat the same things over and over and over and over. From the free thinking idea to trying to use science to disprove God or to prove atheism. The other day, I was having a discussion with this guy on Twitter, and he's telling me that science is atheistic. And I said, no, science is not atheistic. You will not find any journal, peer review or not, making claims that God does not exist. You will not find that because science is not, I'm not going to say not interested in that, but they're concerned with nature, studying the things in nature. That's what they're concerned with. And again, scientists will not make any claims that there is no God as a general body. Of course, you will have certain scientists out there, Dawkins, Krauss, and Sean, and all those guys, making all kinds of claims that we don't need a God, and the universe didn't need a God, and blah blah blah. And of course, they have gotten shot down by other scientists who say, "Wait, what you're saying is not science. That's not science at all." Because if you make such a claim that there is no God, you have to back that up. You have to provide evidence for that. You have to show the model for that. Simply stating that, okay, the Big Bang happened, and this happened, and that happened, does not mean that God had nothing to do with it. Because the Big Bang theory is just describing what happened. It's not exactly describing how or who did it. Now, the only place in academia where you will find papers on God and regarding existence of God is in philosophy and of course theology, but in philosophy you will find papers and journals about that. But you will find rarely you will find any academic journal of philosophy making a claim there is no God and then presenting all kinds of philosophical arguments. Rarely you will find that. You will probably find one from the early 1900s, late 1800s, a paper making such claims. But anything recent, most likely you will not find it. Because again, it's very difficult to make such a claim, especially when you don't have any evidence for that. It's nearly impossible. How could you tell somebody there isn't something when you cannot prove that? How is that possible? And what makes you think that that person is going to believe you just because you said it? I mean, who are you? If if you tell me, there isn't this, I'm going to ask you, how do you know? Why should I believe you? And if you don't have anything to say, I'm just gonna say, okay, go away. I don't want to hear it because you don't have anything to show me. There's no reason at all why I should consider dialoguing with you or listening to what you have to say because you don't have anything to support your claims or whatnot. So these atheists, they recycle these things over and over and over and over and over, and it gets redundant and it gets boring to me, really. And like I said, it is really difficult to find an atheist online who is actually a free thinker because all they do is recycle the same arguments that they heard from Dawkins or Hitchens. And then they like to use these silly terms, hitch slap, like if Christopher Hitchens did anything special in regards to argument. Uh, William Lane Craig shut him down numerous times in debates. And Richard Dawkins is obviously afraid to debate him. Now, Cross, at least he tries. He goes on debates against Craig, but what what Krauss likes to do is he likes to overfill the plate, so to speak. He likes to display too much knowledge of science, almost like a mask to show that, yeah, I know what I'm talking about. Just because he's citing this theory or this model or quoting this guy or whatnot. And of course, to the audience, who probably the majority never studied physics, it will sound like he knows his stuff. It will sound like he's making a strong argument. But if you have a degree in physics, rather, and you understand the terminology and what he's talking about, and then you try to connect that to the idea of God, you will see that this guy is he's just trying to piece things together to make sense. He's inferring what science does not say. Because again, science does not make the claim that there is no God. These ideas that the universe doesn't need a God, they do not come from science. They come from opinions of some scientists. There's a big difference. From an opinion from 1, 2, or 3, 4, or 5 scientists, as opposed to something that's published and accepted by the entire scientific community. And you will not find that. You will not find science as a body, as an academic body, making the claim that God does not exist or that the universe did not need a God. This is why Krauss and Hawkins, they had to make these claims in their own private books, not in journals that they publish. Because they cannot support these ideas with science. They can't. These are their opinions. They study in the field. They are cosmologists, physicists, and whatnot. And they know the information, obviously. And they come to their conclusion based on their own cognitive bias that there's no need for a God. But science does not say that. This is where their opinion comes in, how they interpret whatever the knowledge is at the time regarding physics, astrophysics, cosmology, etc., etc. Now, I'm looking right here. I still don't see anybody asking questions or anything. So hopefully this thing is working. I still don't see anybody showing up here. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong, but I'm looking around. You probably hear me clicking back and forth because I'm trying to switch between pages tabs here to hopefully I don't hang myself up. But just seeing if anybody messaged or something like that, but I don't see anything. But anyhow, back to the atheism is stupid. Another thing that they use is the denial of causality. And what I mean by that is that some atheists, not all of them, start making all kinds of arguments, saying that the universe does not have a cause. And again, they misinterpret science, they take science, and they come about with all kinds of ideas using science, just like Hawkins or Krauss does. They come up with all kinds of ideas that science never stated, that the theory that they're using to so-called disprove God or disqualify God does not state. So it brings about a huge dilemma because again, if you know science, if you know physics, and they come at you saying that the universe did not have a cause, or that quantum particles, virtual particles do not have a cause or do not need a cause and so forth, and you know your stuff in regards to physics and quantum physics and whatnot, then you could catch them in their lie, in their distortion of science. And the other day, I was having a discussion with someone on the community, and I'm trying to look for it right now, where he was basically trying to support an argument that Sean, a physicist, made during a debate with William Lane Craig. And again, William Lane Craig is not a scientist, he's a philosopher, he's a theologian. So his arguments are going to be based on that, on logic, not on theories or scientific models or mathematics. Now, he may borrow some ideas from maybe any friends he may have who may be physicists. He might discuss with them or not, but he's not qualified to speak on physics. But it's okay for him to try to use physics to explain God and not to explain God, but the necessity for the universe to have God, because physics cannot explain God. Nothing can. God is infinite. We are finite. There's no way the finite can explain the infinite. Not even the Pope can do it. No priest, no reverend, no theologian can explain God. What we have is what was revealed to us in the person of Christ. That's what we can rely on. But as far as trying to explain God completely, 100%, using any field of study, theology, philosophy, science, any branch of science, it's just not going to work, because it's like trying to put the ocean in a cup of water. It's impossible. It will not work at all. So this guy on the community, he's trying to use physics to explain why virtual particles don't have a cause. That they basically fluctuate in and out of existence. And a lot of atheists love to try to distort science. They read these things or they hear these things from certain physicists like Krauss and whatnot. And to them, it sounds convincing because, again, Krauss and these guys, they twist physics and the knowledge of physics in a way that agrees with their cognitive bias, which is atheism. So, of course, if you're not well versed in physics and or whatever field of science the person is using, then you're not going to question or analyze critically whatever this person is saying, because you're not an expert on it. And the person will obviously present it in such a way that's convincing that you will fall for it. You will begin to accept it, whatnot. And with the idea of physics, this guy was claiming that the virtual particles fluctuate in and out from existence. So therefore, the material was already there. So there was no need for a creator or a cause or a prime mover, to use a philosophical term, in order to begin, create the universe. And I study physics. That's one of my fields of study. So I know this stuff. Not at a doctorate level, but I do know enough to understand it and to earn the paper in it, so to speak. So I corrected him, and I told him that cosmic inflation posits that everything began from a singularity. So as it stands, the models that we have today, thanks to Monsignor Lemaitre, who was a Catholic priest who formulated the Big Bang Theory or cosmic inflation, the knowledge that we have now is that everything began from a singularity and began to expand. What was around this singularity, we have no clue. And just even trying to think about it will give you a headache, because this singularity contained everything that's here in the universe now. Space, the concept of time, energy, all of those things that we now know of in this universe was all compressed in that singularity. So if it was compressed, then what was around it? we probably will never know that. It would be extremely difficult to try to figure that out. And mathematics has failed numerous times to try to formulate a model or something to explain where was this singularity at? Because obviously it was somewhere. What is that somewhere? And what triggered it to expand? We still do not know that. And as a matter of fact, math starts to disintegrate, so to speak, along with the laws of physics when we try to look back in time before Planck time to understand what happened during the expansion of this singularity or during the time. I use the word loosely because there was no time, but just to give you a mental illustration, the mathematics breaks down. We don't know what happened. We cannot go. The farthest you could go is about 6 to 12 seconds or so, probably more, of when the cosmic inflation began to take place. That's as far as we can go. Because what happens is that the laws of physics start breaking down. And when the laws of physics start breaking down, then you have nothing. What can you work on? And when the laws of physics start breaking down, so does mathematics. So right there, you lose your most important tools to try to figure out the universe. So this is why it makes it difficult to study the origin of the universe and in regards to the Big Bang Theory or cosmic inflation. So this guy, this atheist, Matthew, he's making the argument that these virtual particles fluctuate in space and time. And that's true, they do fluctuate. But that does not mean that they do not have a cause. Because as we know it, the universe has a contingent nature. It's dependent on something else to exist. It doesn't exist on its own accord, so to speak. It's dependent on something. Science still has not figured that out. And of course, religion makes the claim that that something is God, who's outside of space and time. So the Matthew was confused about the what's called the uncertainty principle and how it relates to these particles. And there's a reason why it's called uncertainty, because it's uncertain. We really don't know what's going on with these particles fluctuating in and out and whatnot. So as per the uncertainty principle, the energy levels affects the accuracy of its temporal existence. So in other words, the energy, depending on the amount of energy the particle has, is what allows it to exist in time, in space and time. This does not mean that they do not have a cause. And the reason why is because the Heisenberg formula allows us to understand the quantum fluctuation of electrons, virtual electrons, and virtual positrons, containing a mass of 9.11 times 10 to the negative 31. So this means that these virtual particles can only exist for about 3.24 times 10 to the minus 24 seconds, which is nearly impossible to fathom with the mind. That's how fast these particles appear and disappear. So this allows them to come from nothing, showing causality, showing that they do have a cause. They're not just there appearing out of nowhere and disappearing. Something causes them to appear and then disappear within that time, 3.24 times 10 to the minus 34 seconds. And again, that's an estimate. So there, the whole argument though that the universe does not need a cause, etc., falls apart. And atheists, again, they hear these different fancy chick sayings from crowds and whatnot, and they say, yeah, he finally disproved the theist. He probably science won over religion. No, it hasn't. It's just that you don't understand what this guy is talking about. This guy is sweet talking you with science, and since you don't know the stuff, it sounds good to you, so you buy into it. Just like a car salesman comes to you and tries to sell you a car, saying it's the best thing in the world. Presenting you a car or a minivan or SUV, telling you is explaining it to you, describing it to you in a way that it sounds like it's the best thing since sliced bread. And if you don't know anything about cars and about value, and you don't have any experience with that, you will get suckered, and you end up buying this vehicle, and then when in fact there's something else out there that's even better than what this salesperson made you think. So this is what Krauss and these atheist scientists out there do with atheists. They confuse the heck out of them. They try to make these arguments sound fancy and whatnot. And even during the debate with WLC, William Lane Craig, you could see that Craig gets confused as Krauss is talking. And even Krauss gets confused because he gets so excited while he's presenting his arguments that he's not thinking about what he's saying. And God forbid I'm in the audience because I will stand up and shout and say, "No, you got it wrong. That's not what it says. That's not what the theory says. You're misinterpreting it. You twisting it to your advantage." But again, if the audience does not know about physics or science, cosmology, and all of that, they will easily believe what this guy says. And that's unfortunate, but it happens because if you're not well versed in something, then you fall for anything. As that saying goes, if you don't stand for something, you fall for anything. So if you don't have that knowledge base of whatever the speaker is talking to you about, then of course the argument is going to sound convincing and whatnot because you're hearing it for the first time, and this person is presenting it in such a way that's intended to be convincing and whatnot. So um, we have to be careful when we see atheist scientists trying to use science to disprove God and make claims that the universe did not need a God. We don't know enough to make that claim because obviously this universe is huge, and the fact, I should say, that we know this universe is huge, this goes to show you that we still have a lot to learn. So I don't care how many degrees Neil Tyson deGrasse or Lawrence Krauss or Richard Dawkins or Daniel Dent. I don't care. Or one of my own former professors, Bellucci. I don't care how many degrees these guys have, how many PhDs, degrees, postdoctoral studies they have. If you're coming with a claim that there is no God and you claim science supports that, you're lying. You're lying to the people. You're lying to atheists. And that's very unfortunate. And Carl Sagan, one of the greatest scientists from the postmodern world, in my opinion, who was an astronomer, he said something very powerful, which I constantly remind atheists about, both online and offline. And he said this when he was being interviewed. And if my screen cooperates with me, I could read it for you and give you the source so that you could go look for it yourself, so that you won't think that I just made it up. Because again, which is another thing I was telling somebody on Twitter, that they were sending me all kinds of memes or those graphics with quotes on them. And I looked at them and I said, the person that you claim said this never said that. And then they were arguing with me saying, yeah, they did say that. And I said, no, they're not. And I showed them that these people did not say that. Or that they said something similar, but it's not exactly the way the image, the meme states it. And I told them, here's some advice for the future. Whenever you see a graphic or image or meme that doesn't have a source or reference of where it got that quote or idea, throw it away. It's nonsense. So this is why I like to cite and give the reference of whatever I'm quoting or who I'm quoting, so that you know I'm not trying to BS you or lie to you or be dishonest to you. You could go to the library and get the book and look at it yourself. Like Burton used to say on Reading Rainbow, don't take my word for it. Go look for it yourself. So anyhow, this is from the book Conversations with Carl Sagan. And there's two versions. There's one from 1981 and 2006. And on page 70, Carl Sagan responds to a question regarding atheism and God in this manner. Quote, an atheist is someone who is certain that God does not exist. Someone who has compelling evidence against the existence of God. I know no such compelling evidence, because God can be relegated to remote times and places, and to the ultimate causes. We will have to know a great deal more about the universe than we do now to be sure that no such God exists. End quote. So, in my best Carl Sagan impersonation, that's what he replied during this interview. And what he's saying is that an atheist is someone who doesn't believe in God. And all those atheists out there making all kinds of, they create their own definition along the way of what atheism is. And this is the fault of Richard Dawkins, who in his book starts presenting this chart of different levels of atheism. There's no different levels of atheism. You either believe or you don't believe. You don't believe, you don't want nothing to do with God, you're an atheist. If you do believe and you want something to do with God, then you're a theist. It's as simple as that. This whole in-between agnostic atheist, agnostic theist is nonsense. It's a conflation of terms, creating a Frankenstein of stupidity. That's all it is. So atheism is just without God. You don't believe in God. You don't accept God. You reject God for whatever reason. You're not a religious being. You're not a theist. That's what atheist means, atheism. So Sagan says that this is someone who has, who or claims to have compelling evidence against the existence of God. And he says, I know no such compelling evidence. And this is Carl Sagan. This guy was a genius. This guy was very intelligent. And he's stating right there that he knows of no evidence showing that there is no God. And then he goes on to argue, saying that God can be relegated to remote times, in places, and to ultimate causes. And in order for us to completely disqualify the existence of God, or solidly present the idea that the universe does not need a God, is if we know about the entire universe. Carl Sagan specifically states that we will have to know a great deal more about the universe than we do now to be sure that no such God exists. And my friends, we have not even scratched the surface on this universe. This universe is humongous. There's no way. And I hate to be a pessimist. I mean, I always try to be optimistic, but there's no logical way the human being could ever know about the entire universe. And then, God forbid, if we discover that there are multiple universes. Imagine the headache. If we discover that the multiverse theory is, or hypothesis rather, is legitimate. If we discover that, yes, there are different universes out there, parallel universes, alternate universes, or just a neighbor universe next to ours, that would make things even more complicated, because then we need to ask the questions. Did God create all those universes? Is there a God for each universe? it would just create a big mess. But luckily, as it stands, the data really doesn't fit the hypothesis. So it's just some physicists out there trying to be creative and posit all kinds of new theories and ideas where in fact it's really very difficult to prove if there are any multiverses out there. And then another thing that I speak about and or write about, and the atheism is stupid, is the abuse of science. And I give you some examples of that, where Krauss and these different characters love to use science to their advantage, and they make claims that science does not make. And I give you some examples of that, and how it's very irresponsible of them to present science in such a manner. And I told the same thing to that guy on Twitter who was trying to make the claim that science is atheistic, when in fact it's not. So whenever we see Krauss and Dawkins and all that citing evolution and all kinds of different theories out there, and using those to try to claim that God is not necessary, or that we do not need a God, or that God does not exist, ignore them, because they are twisting science. They are perverting science to agree with their conclusions, with their own personal conclusions, with their own convictions. Because again, I cannot stress enough the fact that science is not atheistic. And because science only focuses on the natural world, that's what it focuses on: nature, the material world. If in fact we are material, because as we learn more about quantum physics and whatnot, the whole universe gets crazier and crazier and stranger and stranger. And we are all, despite having the sensation of solidity, we are all mostly empty space, all of us. Our bodies, this blue microphone that I'm speaking to you on, the computer that's processing my voice and my sites and Google and all that stuff. It may look solid, it may feel solid, but in reality, it's mostly empty space. Over 99% empty space. And Aristotle, he was a very intelligent guy, and he figured that out. Because he figured out if everything was solid, we wouldn't be able to move. So obviously, particles have to have space. They have to have empty space in order to allow themselves to move around. And you create I use the word illusion of movement. And then the sense of solidity comes from the Coulomb repulsion, which is pretty much the field generated by electrons rather. And these fields repel each other. So atoms repel each other, and that repulsion is the sense of solid that we perceive, that our brains tell us is solid. Where in fact we're not really touching anything. What we're perceiving is that force. That's what we perceive as touch. And depending on the charges of the particles, that's how we distinguish what's liquid, gas, what's has the sensation of being hard or solid, when in fact it's not. Was hot and was cold, depending on the different charges of these different particles. Our brains evolved to process all of that information. So again, I cannot stress enough that science is not atheistic. Anyone who tells you that is a liar. Does not understand science at all, and should be, ashamed to mislead people in such a manner, because you're perverting science. The field of science is meant to be objective. It's not meant to come about with all these conclusions based on personal views or whatnot. It's supposed to fit the facts. A theory or hypothesis has to fit the evidence that's being used to support or negate the hypothesis, the null hypothesis. Science was not meant for people to just come out of nowhere and say, okay, this happens because of this, and then you don't have any evidence for it. That's not what science is. So be very careful out there when you have these different atheistic scientists out there making all kinds of claims and whatnot, because science is not atheistic at all, and science is not religious either. Science is just focused on nature, the natural world, the material world. That's all it concerns itself with. And when it presents a hypothesis, it tries to present evidence for or against it. And depending on what evidence shows up, it stands firm or falls apart. That's what science is. And unfortunately, a lot of online atheists abuse science. And it hurts me because I'm a student of science. It was my first passion. So when I see atheists distorting science and whatnot, it's horrendous. It's just mind-boggling. And the same thing with some theists, of course. I'm not gonna give them a free pass either. Especially those who call themselves creationists, who want to try at all costs to make the universe or the Earth 6,000 years old, or claim that dinosaurs were somehow around with human beings, or that evolution never happened, that human beings literally came from ribs or soil or whatnot. And this just shows the ignorance that they do not understand the allegory behind the story of Genesis. And how the author is trying to use the way that people understood things back then to convey the story of God the Creator, the first human beings, and sin, and the promise of a Savior coming. That's all the story is really supposed to convey. It's not supposed to detail exactly how it happened, because the people didn't know. They didn't have the knowledge back then. Now, the story of Genesis is eerily very similar to evolution if you really look at it. But that's another topic for another show. And I will explain, while reading Genesis, explain how evolution does, in a sense, match it. And especially with some new discoveries now that were made, which should be an interesting and fun show to do. Another thing atheists like to do is misrepresent history. And being Catholic, a lot of things that get brought up are the Inquisition of the Crusades. And President Obama recently did the mistake of distorting the Crusades and the Inquisition, as if Christians were out there to hurt people, kill people, and that's exactly contrary to what history really says happened. The Crusades was a defensive move. The Moors, the Muslims, were taking over our lands. They were taking over the Holy Land. And to this day, they have the Mount of the Ascension, where it's said that Jesus rose to heaven. They took that property from us. So the Moors were going around taking everything from the Christians, killing Christians. So the Christians had to defend themselves. They had to fight back and try their best to recapture these stolen territories from the Moors, the Muslims. So this is where the Crusades came from. It was a defense against the Moors. It wasn't that the Christians decided one day to get on horses and go around and kill people in the name of Christ. That's not what the Crusades was about. The Crusades was an offense, a response to the Moors who were conquering and taking over the lands and the churches, the properties of the church. And of course, the Holy Land. I mean, we need the Holy Land. It was promised to the Jews, and the first Christians were Jews. So that's our spiritual motherland. So they have to protect it. Just like today, if ISIS comes into the United States in the way that is organized in Syria and Iraq and so forth, if they come here dressed in black with their flags and whatnot, and they try to take over different states in the United States, do you think Americans are just going to sit back and watch the show and give their land freely to these people? Of course not. You better believe that everybody's going to go out and fight. Even the regular citizens are going to go out, and since we do have the freedom to bear arms, anyone who has an arm is going to go out there and defend their land, the United States of America, along with the Army, the Marines, the National Guard, the police, FBI, whatever law enforcement is in the United States at any point of an invasion. God forbid it happens. So the same thing with the Crusades. It was a defense. They had to defend the Holy Land and, of course, the rest of Europe from the Moors who were going. And the Inquisition had nothing to do with the church. It had nothing to do with the Catholic Church. This was political. Politicians at the time felt that certain people, heretics, were trying to disrupt the social order. So they arrested these people and inquired, wanted to find out why they were going against society, why they were going against the Catholic Church. What was their ulterior motive? That was the whole purpose of the Inquisition. It wasn't that the church just wanted to arrest people and torture them or whatnot. Now, some people in the church did resort to crazy things, just like today we have some crazy Catholics out there doing crazy things. But that's not representative of the entire Catholic body, the Catholic Church. And any such comparison is just irresponsible to make. Just like not every white person is part of the KKK. Not every black person is part of the Black Panthers or the movement now with the hands up, don't shoot. Not every black person is part of that. That's not representative of African Americans, despite the media showing it as something that's representative of them. It's not. So, unfortunately, a lot of atheists out there online are not well educated in history, and of course, this is not their fault. It's because they read these things from blogs or from Dawkins and whatnot, and they trust the authority of it, the authority of these guys, and they say, oh well, Dawkins said it must be true. He's a scientist, right? And then since he's an atheist like you, of course you're going to side with him and agree with him. That's the bias, the cognitive bias. We side with and agree with whatever agrees with our own stance, with our own positions, opinions, whatnot. This is Psychology 101. Now, I'm going to check back again to see if there's anybody messaging and whatnot. And as it stands, I see nothing here. So if you are messaging me, please email me or something, because as it stands, I'm not seeing anything here. I'm clicking the Q&A blue thing, and it says ask your audience to submit questions, which I did, and it says they will appear below. And I see questions, and I don't see anything here. So if you are sending me something, I'm not seeing it here. But so far, it looks like I'm not getting anything here. And again, I was hoping that this open mic thing will inspire atheists to come and talk. Because obviously they love to chat with me on these threads. I mean, I post a blog, and within seconds I get like 5 or 10 comments on the post, and they clearly want me to engage them. And they get upset when I say I'm not going to engage them on the thread, and they start calling me coward or whatnot. And there's several reasons for that, and it's not cowardice at all, because if I was afraid, I wouldn't be in the group, period, or the community. There's several reasons, like I said. One of the reasons is lack of time. Unfortunately, I don't have control of time, and I cannot just answer everybody's comments. And obviously, my posts, my comments, my own threads are very provocative many times, and I do that on purpose because I want people to dialogue. I want people to think. So I word things specifically in a way to to cause provocation, to get a response. So since I get a lot of responses, one thing that I posted on a community, it generated over 93 or so comments. Now, who in the world has time to look through 93 comments and respond to each of them? And then as you responded to them, they're getting responded to. So then you have to go back and respond to those you already responded to. Who has the time to do all that? No one has the time to do that. So if you comment or say something or write something in the community or something, or my Twitter account, Facebook, or anything, any site that I'm on, and for some reason I don't get back to you, it's because I probably didn't see it, or because I can't answer everybody, unfortunately. I'm not a deity. I'm not omnipresent. I'm not all powerful. I cannot pause space and time. I cannot do like Jim Carrey and Bruce Almighty, where he had the computer with the Yahoo parody of Yahweh and could answer everybody's emails or prayers at the same time. And I don't have that ability, so you have to work with me. And if you want to comment on something, at least give me time to respond to it, and don't be so quick to counter reply, because then it starts piling up. Because guess what? You're not the only one replying. Other people are replying too. So then all that starts piling up. And when I look at my phone, which is another problem, I hate using touchscreens. And typing on them is just a mess. So I prefer to use a computer to type and respond to people. But when I can't, I use the phone the best that I can. And sometimes you notice when there's typos on it or it doesn't make sense, it's because it's the phone's fault. But I look at the phone, I see in my email like 200, 300 notifications. And I just look at it and say, okay, you're right. There's no way I can answer all of that. It'll take forever, at least a week to answer all of that. And then, like I said before, people start replying as I'm replying to them. So I can't get into that. It's just too time consuming. And then it's the problem of trolls. There's certain people out there who claim to be atheists. And instead of having a discussion, a nice civil educated discussion, they start just insulting you, cursing at you, calling you a moron or a pedophile, or claiming that you're not educated or whatnot. And I mean, those things are not, they're uncalled for. I mean, why would you do that? First of all, you don't know me, you don't know anybody else. to just come to them and insult them as if they were your enemy. I'm not your enemy. I doubt any other theists in these communities on Twitter or whatever are your enemy. We're just here to explain our position to the best we can, the best of our ability. And hopefully you will do the same with your atheistic beliefs or ideas. So there's no need to go on these threads and just start cursing people out and insulting them and whatnot. What did you get out of that? If the group or the community or Twitter is about discussion or sharing ideas, what exactly are you sharing by insulting people and resorting to ad hominem? What do you hope to get out from that? In real life, if you do that to somebody, you get punched in the face. Go up to somebody and curse them out just out of nowhere. Suppose there's a group of people having a conversation in the corner in the street somewhere, and you interject and you start cursing at one of them. What do you think is going to happen? The person's going to beat the hell out of you. So try to apply the same civility you would do in real life on these internet threads or Twitter accounts or Facebook pages. What they call it, Facebook walls or whatever. Try to pretend that it's real life, and if you're going to interject in a conversation online, do so with civility and with, try to at least make your argument make some sense. And you'll be surprised how the conversation goes along much better. And you may get the answer that you're looking for and whatnot. But if you just go and storm these threads or Twitter feeds or Facebook walls, insulting people and cursing at people, then you're just gonna instigate hostility, and it's just gonna make things worse. People are gonna be fighting, arguing, and in a negative sense, not arguing in the sense of trying to prove their point of view or idea, but arguing in the sense of hating on each other, insulting each other, and whatnot. And that's something that we don't want because it's not fun. I mean, it may be fun to you, but it's not fun for everybody else because there's actually genuine people out there who do want to discuss. There are atheists out there who genuinely do want to discuss with people. And it might be for personal reasons. Maybe they are curious about God or religious belief. Maybe they were religious at one point and they were turned off, or they didn't get the answers they wanted from the priest or reverend or whatever. And they're trying on these social networks, or maybe they don't dare approach a priest or somebody, and they use this anonymous internet thing to try to present their questions. So there are genuine people out there who really want to discuss with you and dialogue with you. But unfortunately, there's this group of people, trolls, who come out of nowhere and they disrupt the whole thing, and it just makes it unpleasant. So that's another reason why I am trying to refrain from getting into these discussion on these threads. It's not about cowardice and whatnot, because obviously you could contact me via email. There's different ways you could contact me. And this is why I started this open mic thing where anyone could come and discuss with me live. So there's no excuse that I'm deleting comments or blocking comments or blocking threads or whatnot. Because you could talk to me live right here and ask questions, make comments, get into a discussion and whatnot. So I was hoping it will be more fruitful in that manner. It will be more productive. And we can have a discussion and get to the point. And I just saw somebody here say hello, but I don't see the question. So, I mean, do you have a question that you want to ask? Just send it the same way you did, because I'm not sure what you see on your end, because I'm on a different screen here. So somebody just said hello, but did not really ask a question. So hopefully somebody out there, some atheists out there, somebody will send something or question or whatnot. And I just wait a little bit. I'll get some water and be right back. Okay, so far nothing yet. Just that person who said hello. So in the meantime, let me just bring up some things in the news. Indiana just passed a bill that protects religious freedom, and some people, especially people in the liberal spectrum of politics, are having a hissy fit over this bill because they claim this bill is going to encourage discrimination against um, the LGBT people, whatnot. And I was looking through the bill and whatnot, and I could see their concerns, but they really do not have any concern to hold on to in regards to discrimination because the purpose of this bill was to protect religious freedom. And I just published a post on that on the news today, or well, yeah, a couple of hours ago, and I explained why we need these types of bills, and it's not to put down another community or whatnot, but the main reason why the United States even exists is because of religious freedom. Europeans fled Europe seeking land where they can settle and have their religion, pray the way they want to, believe the way they want to, preach the way they want to, worship the way they want to. And when the news reached the old world, so to speak, that this new land, America, existed, then everybody wanted to flock to it. The Puritans, they purchased contracts to come to what was the land that will become the United States. The Massachusetts Bay um, colony was founded by the Puritans in order to have an area where they could express their religious ideas freely. Why? Because in Europe they were being persecuted. When the Reformation started taking hold, everybody was, well, not everybody, but people started killing each other. Protestants started killing Catholics. Catholics started killing Protestants. We still see this nonsense in Europe and in Northern Ireland, where towns are divided by Catholic and Protestant, which is ridiculous. I mean, it's something Jesus would disapprove of 100%. But it goes on fallen human nature. We all love to do stupid things. We are territorial and blah blah blah. It's unfortunate, but so they were facing all kinds of persecution in their homelands, in the Netherlands and all these different areas of Europe. So they fled. They came to the what will become Massachusetts, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Maine, and all the New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and they began to settle and form these different colonies in order to worship freely without having to worry about any government or any king or queen telling them how to worship or what church to belong to. Maryland was started by Catholics, for Catholics. That's the whole reason why the colony of Maryland existed. That's why it's called Maryland. Maryland, the Virgin Mary. Because they were seeking religious freedom. They were being harassed in Europe. The Queen and the King in England, Great Britain would have priests executed, nuns executed, monks. Their the church's properties were confiscated. All these buildings that, well, not all of them, but most of them, the older ones that the Anglican community uses, that used to belong to the Catholic Church, and they were taken from us because of King Henry VIII, with his dispute with the Pope and whatnot, and the formation of the Anglican community. So everybody started fleeing Europe to come to this new land and start fresh, new, independent, so that they can worship freely. So freedom of religion was the number one reason why the Europeans came over here. And this is why in the First Amendment, the first protected right is religion. Freedom of religion is the first protected right, the first thing mentioned by the Constitution that's protected. The government cannot interfere in religion. The government cannot tell religion what to do. It doesn't say separation of church and state. It says that the government cannot interfere with religion, with the church. And unfortunately, lately, with the LGBT gaining wins in courts and throughout the states, religious people have suffered greatly. Now, when I say suffer greatly, I don't mean that they're getting beheaded or killed like what's going on with ISIS in the Middle East. What I mean is that their religious freedom is being oppressed. Bakers, churches, and other institutions have been sued for refusing to endorse the LGBT lifestyle, which is contrary to their religious beliefs. The Catholic Church, many dioceses, had to shut down their adoption agencies and other charities because they were being forced to go against their religious beliefs. And that's sad because the church is the second largest charity in the United States, next to the government, of course, because the government has more money. But if the Catholic Church closes up shop, so to speak, in regards to social work, helping others, then the government would struggle like crazy. People would, you will see mass amounts of people going to welfare and all kinds of services in order to stay afloat, because you wouldn't have the Catholic Church there providing food and helping people with immigration or finding an apartment, helping people in jail and prison to come out and reestablish themselves. Hospitals, you wouldn't have people being taken care of. Everybody will have to go to the secular hospitals, to the government hospitals. And a lot of these government hospitals are shutting down because of lack of money. So imagine if all the Catholic hospitals shut down, all the Protestant hospitals will not shut down. Namely the Catholic ones, because we have more of them. The government will suffer greatly trying to take care of all these people and their needs. Yeah, we had this little group trying to force their agenda on the rest of us. And churches have had enough. Enough is enough. So this rule, this law in Indiana prohibits a governmental entity from substantially burdening a person's exercise of religion, even if the burden results from a rule of general applicability, unless the governmental entity can demonstrate that the burden, one, is in furtherance of a compelling governmental interest, and two, is the least restrictive means of furthering the compelling government interest. So now we see on these social networks people boycotting Indiana and whatnot. And that's really just ignorance. They really don't understand what's going on. And certain businesses are threatening to take their business elsewhere if Governor Pence does not veto the law. I mean, talk about bullying. This is exactly why this law had to pass. Because we see a tyrannical minority who wants to be the one running the show. And that's not fair. They do not care whether religious businesses and persons are sued for adhering to their religious beliefs. They're basically trying to push religion out of society. And again, America was founded for that reason, religious freedom. So the Indiana say enough is enough. All it seeks is to protect religious freedom. And a good example is in New Jersey, where some people were complaining that a Catholic cemetery was selling headstones. And they complained, and a bill was passed, and Governor Christie signed it into law, preventing the diocese from selling headstones. I mean, come on. This is their cemetery. That's their business that they're running, a cemetery. Who are you to tell them not to make headstones? Just because a couple of people are complaining. And then in California, with Archbishop Salvatore Cordeleon, he's being harassed and pressured to change his hiring practices in regards to teachers who have to sign a certain clause that they have to abide by certain teachings of the church and whatnot. And we have lawyers and people protesting the Archbishop, saying that he's discriminating and he can't do that and whatnot. I mean, who are you to tell the church how to hire people? Again, it's defying the Constitution. The government's interfering with the church, with religion. It's wrong. So these laws need to be passed in order to protect religious freedom. And this bill has been in process for over 20 years. It's not something that just appeared the other day. And ironically, Democratic President Bill Clinton, he signed in 1983 the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which passed almost unanimously by Congress. So Clinton did it. And people didn't protest then. Why? Because the LGBT agenda did not enjoy the power and the audience it does now. So it's much different 2015 than it was in 1993. And our current president, when he was a senator in Illinois, he favored the Religious Freedom Act in his state in 1998. So this whole law that was passed in Indiana is needed in order to protect religious freedom. Otherwise, we will have these people trying to sue us constantly just for believing the way we believe. And there are many instances of that in Europe, in the United Kingdom, where certain people are being sued, specifically those street preachers out there who scream from the top of their lungs about the Bible or whatnot. Those fundamentalist Protestants. They scream to the top of their lungs to repent and whatnot, and they quote scripture and whatnot. Well, a couple of them were arrested and jailed for citing a Bible passage. I mean, that's wrong. That's something that we shouldn't see in the West. I would expect that somewhere where ISIS or some fundamentalist radical religious group is in control and doesn't want any opposing views within their territory. I could see that in that area, but in a place like the United Kingdom or America, getting arrested or sued just for your religious belief, I mean, that's just crazy. It's absurd. It's ludicrous. So something has to be done. So, I mean, kudos to Governor Mike Pence, for signing the bill into law. And I believe 15 or 16 other states have similar laws protecting religious freedom. And we need this. We need these things. Otherwise, what hell's going to break out in the United States? This minority tries to silence religion in the church and whatnot. Man, there's more of us than there are of them. But unfortunately, some of us have been brainwashed to believe that this movement is legitimate, that it's a legitimate civil rights group or whatnot, when in fact it's not. It's just a subculture seeking to be free to promote their own ideas, perversions, and and nonsense and whatnot. So wanted to talk a little bit on that. Now, I still do not see any questions or anything here. And I'm hoping people will comment or write or do something, but I bet you that if I post a comment or something on a thread, you will get all kinds of responses. But I'm here live and they don't want to show up. So that's just interesting to say the least. I still do not see anyone here. Just waiting, just looking around to see if anybody shows up, any questions and whatnot. So far, I don't see anything. Anything going on here or whatnot. Still waiting, but so as it stands, I don't see anybody here asking questions or commenting and whatnot. So I guess this concludes the open mic. Hopefully next time some people will show up and we'll get something going. Instead of just having me talking here, because I could talk forever and on different topics, and I don't think listeners will appreciate that. So again, thank you for listening. God bless and Merry keep.